Hey, welcome to Keys to Balance with Amanda Hill. Super excited, you guys. I mean, this is my first podcast, and I really just want to take my time with this and share what this podcast is really about and what is the goal with this podcast. And ultimately, it's about what the intro said. It's all about forgiveness and discipline. What I've discovered in my short 44 years on this earth is that without forgiveness and discipline, you really can only go so far. And I'm hoping to share that in this podcast and to interview some people and get their thoughts on how discipline and forgiveness has helped them throughout their lives. Because I know it's definitely helped me. So, with that being said, let's jump in. We're going to take you back, all the way back. I'm going to take you back to when I was 4 years old when I lost my mom to cancer. She was 35. The interesting thing in this is that my mom was told by doctors that she could not give birth to another child. She actually had another type of cancer. I'm not going to try to pretend to know which one it was. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember. But she already had four kids. And so when you think about it, it's she didn't necessarily have to want to have another child because she already had four. But there was something in her that desired to have another child, and she wanted a girl. So she actually went to church and got hands laid on her and was healed. And she got pregnant with me. And I love the way my older brother Kenny tells the story because he says that when I was born, she would introduce me to everyone as her miracle baby because I wasn't supposed to be here. And it was a miracle that I was conceived, that she had a perfect pregnancy, and that there was zero complications, had a little bit of jaundice, but nothing major. And, I was a healthy baby. So that's how she would introduce me. And so my middle name actually is Victoria, which stands for victory. Isn't that beautiful? So I take you back to when I was 4 because when you think about it, she prayed to have a child. She had me. And 4 years later, she left this earth. Now, that was really difficult growing up. When I understood how she prayed for me, how she wanted me, and unfortunately, she was taken away. And for a very long time, I struggled with that. I didn't quite understand, God, why would you allow her to have another child knowing that she's going to leave in 4 years? Because, God is all knowing. So it took me a long time to really grasp. And I think the reason why it really troubled me because my father remarried when I was 6, and the wife he chose was not a loving person. She couldn't really love me because she didn't love herself. She was abused as a child, and so she never got the help that she needed. So ultimately, she could not extend something that she did not have. So my childhood, adolescence were very troubling. It was very difficult. So I had to spend a lot of time truly understanding and ultimately forgiving. So this is where this really stems from. This stems from a space of forgiving God, even though God had nothing to do with it. But again, this is my mindset at the time of why would you let her have a child, knowing that she was going to pass, knowing that my father was going to select a bride that was not loving towards this child, all this stuff, right? And so at the age of 19, while I was at university, I was blessed to meet this family. And honestly, I don't even remember their name. That's so crazy about it. But they were ministers, and I was sharing with the wife my pain. And I will be honest, at that time, I had a very strong victim mindset. Um, so she gave me some great advice. She told me to pity her And I just thought to myself, what do you mean pity her? Because she's missing out. She's hurting. She's in pain. And it planted a seed where it helped me soften my heart a little bit to try to have an understanding of why this woman treated me the way she treated me, why she was so cruel to me. And it allowed me to go a little bit deeper and have a greater understanding that she was only doing what she was taught and that love was something that was not in her. I remember years ago hearing, I think it was like TD Jakes or someone saying that you can't continue to ask someone to give you gallon size love and all they have is a pint, something to that extent. And so, you can't expect someone to love you on the level that you want to be loved if they don't have it in them. And over time, I learned to truly forgive, um, not her per se, but more of forgiving my father for selecting her. Because what I realized is that my anger wasn't really with my stepmother. My anger was with my father because I felt like he should have stood up for me as well as my siblings. So this is where it all stems from. It stems from me really getting into a space of forgiveness because for a very long time, that anger or that bitterness that was in me, I was projecting that on everyone else around me, and I was really just hurting myself. And so over the years, I've come up with a mindset of when people hurt me, I look at the innocence. And what I mean by that is I look at them and I say, if they really knew how their pain was hurting me, they probably wouldn't do it. And what that does is it allows me to look at the child in them, the innocence in them, of knowing that they truly don't know how their behavior is hurting me. And so, because of that, it helps me to forgive. Because at the end of the day, forgiveness is really for me. It's not for anyone else, it's not for them. And it's definitely not giving them a green light on their behavior. So, that's where it starts. It starts with looking at the innocence, man. It starts with understanding that, this person doesn't really know how their behavior is affecting me. And they're actually coming from a position of pain. They're projecting their own insecurities, they're projecting their own pain. And so that has helped me throughout the years learn to forgive other people. And I think the hardest part is that, and we'll touch on this later, is forgiving myself. So I don't have a problem forgiving other people because I've learned to say they don't know any better. But the challenging part for me has been forgiving myself. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later. So stay tuned. Did you know that you could take a e-learning course on forgiveness? That's right. Allow me to walk you through the power of forgiveness at your own convenience, your own pace, and wherever you go. Don't allow bitterness to keep you from reaching your goals another day. Let's start your forgiveness journey today by clicking the link in the bio. Okay, so I want to touch on, why do we even need to forgive? I mean, like, seriously, um, especially in today's time, there's people who hold on to some grudges, boy, on a level that is truly is mind-boggling. I'm like, wow, you're really holding on to this pain, man. And so I want to touch on, why do I even think it's important to forgive? Now, of course, from a biblical perspective, God tells us that if you want Him to forgive us, we got to forgive others. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm a strong believer in Jesus. I follow Jesus, and I want to be forgiven for my sins, and therefore I forgive others. And the disciples talk about this. They ask, well, how many times do should I forgive? And He says 70 times 70, which is basically saying infinitely. You should always forgive. So that's really my foundation of why I forgive, is because I understand the ultimate goal is to be forgiven for my sins because I know that I'm not perfect by any way, shape, or form. But for those in just a regular practical lifestyle, right? Why is it important to forgive? Well, for one, you're only hurting yourself. I mean, we've all heard the statements, right? We've all heard the little slogans. Not forgiving is like drinking poison, expecting another person to die. We all heard that. It's true. The body keeps score. You will be so bitter that you will create illnesses within yourself. And I think I'm going to do a podcast about that one day, just strictly about how the body attacks itself through bitterness. Because I think it's really important that people can really grasp what you're putting on yourself by not forgiving, what happens internally to the body. For me personally, when I'm in a state of high anxiety or stress, I tend not to eat. Um, of course, I'm really touchy to everything. I pop back quick. It's just not a good space. So for me, when I'm in a position of like peace and letting things go, my life just flows so much better. And over time, I realize it's just not worth it. I go back to some family members, and it's so interesting to me that they could be telling a story about something that happened to them back in the 80s. And they are telling this story with so much passion. You would think it happened yesterday or last week. And this happened 20, 30 years ago. And you're like, bro, you're still holding on to this? That's crazy. And they're still holding on to grudges that's happened to them, in high school. Oh, I don't like her. She did this or he did that. I'm like, man, that was 30 years ago. So basically, what you're telling me is that you can't change. Because for you to think that this person is the same person that they were 20, 30 years ago, when you probably haven't even really truly interacted with them, that means that you are saying that you are the same person that you were 20, 30 years ago. Now, are there people in our lives that are stuck and don't change? Absolutely. But does that mean that you have to hold on to that same bitterness and hurt that occurred 30, 40 years ago? No, of course not. What it ends up doing, it turns you into this crazy victim. And when you're a victim, you just can't you can't get to the next level because you're too busy pointing out the wrongs of everyone else and how terrible your life is and what you're not able to accomplish because of what someone else did, which doesn't even make any sense. How do you persevere? How do you grow? I mean, let's talk about that. How do you grow? You have to experience something, right? That challenges you, that pushes you. You learn from it, you overcome. That's how you grow. That's how you create character, perseverance, right? That's how athletes build. If you're running on the same pace, same level, same track, you're not gonna nothing's gonna change, right? How are you gonna get stronger? How are you gonna get faster? How are you gonna build muscle? You got to go through something. You got to build character. How do you build character? How do you persevere? When things get tough, what do you do? So you don't want to become a victim. You don't want to sit in a state of woe me. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. What are you doing with your 24 hours? Are you sitting there thinking about what you should have did yesterday, or are you doing something today? So that brings me into discipline. I'm really big on discipline, and I didn't even realize how disciplined I was until I did my first figure competition back in 2006. It's a long time ago. And what I thought was going to be more of a physical challenge became much greater than that. It was absolutely more physical. I'm sorry, it was absolutely more mental and spiritual than physical because you get to a point where mentally you just don't want to go anymore. And then you have to look at the goal. You have to look down the line and say, okay, what are we trying to get out of this? And you persevere and you push and you get up and you go. And you eat a particular way and you train a particular way and you go to the gym twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, just depending on what you're trying to achieve. So that was 100% mental. But what I got out of that whole process Again, this is 2006. Is that I really can push myself to limits. I really can push myself to a, I could push my mind to places physically that I didn't think I could ever go. So in turn, when it became other areas of my life, I created that same habit. I created a blueprint in a sense of you just have to push. You have to get up when you don't feel like getting up. You have to do things you don't necessarily want to do in order to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. I had to surround myself with certain people during that time period because if everybody wanted to go eat fast food, I couldn't do that. So I had to discipline myself with who I was surrounding myself with, had to discipline myself around who was speaking into my life. If there were people that were sarcastic and questioning, well, why are you doing this? Why are you working out so hard? Why are you eating this way? That wasn't helping me. So I became very disciplined. So, same practice in everyday life. Doesn't matter if I'm trying to write a book, if I'm doing an e-course, if I'm trying to achieve something in my corporate career, I make it a point to surround myself around the people that are going to help me achieve that goal, not derail me into something else or talk me into something that I've already made my mind up to do. So I took those same practices, right? I had to do things that didn't necessarily feel good. And so over time, I noticed that this pattern was helping me in every area of my life. And it was discipline and how I did it. So let's correlate that with forgiveness, right? What I've learned over time is that in order to grow, I created a discipline of forgiveness. When someone offends me, someone hurts me, I forgive quickly. Now, again, this does not mean I'm giving them a green light. This doesn't mean I'm sitting there like, oh, it's okay. Absolutely not. I'm creating healthy boundaries. I'm letting this person know this behavior is not okay, but ultimately, a, I'm not expecting them to change. They have to want to change. But what I'm doing is I'm saying I don't have to participate in this behavior anymore. I'm going to move over here. I'm going to let you have it pretty much. And I'm going to forgive so that I can move forward. Because if I sit in this, if I continue to think about the offense, if I continue to think about how you've hurt me, I'm not progressing. I'm going to sit in it. That's not going to help me get to where I have to go. So, discipline is a major component in my life when it comes to forgiveness. I had to create a lifestyle of discipline and forgiveness in order for me to progress and grow in every area of my life because it is not easy. Forgiving is not easy. Training yourself is not easy. But if you create a discipline, you become obedient with your discipline and forgive, put them together. I promise you, you will get to the next level in a way that you didn't even know was possible because you're forgetting all that's behind and you're focusing forward on what's to come. And that's my little tip and that's how I live my life and that's what I hope to sow into you guys. And this is why it's so important. Forgiveness and discipline, those two together, it will definitely change your life. I'm speaking from personal experience. Now, let me add this. I am a huge advocate in therapy. Love it, love it. Um, I always joke and say, if you can make therapy mandated, like it would be the best thing to change the world. If you were like 18 and they force you to do 6 months of therapy. Because, man, we all go through mess, man. Our childhood, adolescence years, they truly define who we are as adults. And adults create a lot of crazy mess. And that's just the output of our childhood. We're teaching our children how to become functioning adults. Either it's dysfunctional or it's not. And the majority of us lean towards dysfunction. And, I went to therapy for a lot of years and I still go and I love it. And that truly helps me too, especially when I'm trying to process forgiveness. Um, Definitely forgiving myself. And I said earlier we were going to touch on that because that's something I'm still dealing with every day. The hardest part is when you've done something that you shouldn't have done. It can be so tiny, miscalculation when it comes to my finances. Like, Amanda, now this should have went here or that should have went there. Why did you make that mistake? Right? Getting distracted, missing a due date on something. And that actually comes from the same practice of being able to forgiving quickly. I had to do that when it came to myself. Now, one thing that came with that is also pride. Having a spirit of perfection comes from pride. You cannot be a perfectionist. If you operate in that space, you need to really study pride and know why are you trying to be perfect? Where is that stemming from? But what I had to do over the years is truly understand that I am a broken person and I'm going to make mistakes and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Let it go. Let's use some wisdom. Let's try to come up with ways to resolve whatever issues out front of us. One of my dear friends would always say to me, if you have options, you're still winning. That's something I live by. If you still have options, you're still winning. Let's not focus on what's happening right now because at this moment it's overwhelming, it's stressful. But Amanda, do you have options? And I immediately say that to myself when I make a mistake. What are your options? And that calms me down. And I'm able to put it out there. I'm like, okay, you know what? You're right. Boom, boom. 9 times out of 10, I feel better. And then I may look at myself and be like, okay, you are right. Keep it going. It's the same practice of forgiving quickly, but it's forgiving myself, right? Now, of course, these are bigger things, right? So, having a failed marriage is different. Training your children the wrong way, them seeing you fail in certain areas, and then picking up bad behavior traits because you actually did that in front of them, and you're like, oh my God, she acts just like me. This is my fault. I did that. Right. So those are things that are a little bit more challenging when it comes to forgiving yourself, but it's the same practice. What are the options here? Do you sit in this state of being a victim and saying, oh my God, or do you go, can you apologize to your child and say, hey, I didn't know any better. I'm getting better now. You know, I'm learning new ways. Let me try to help you with this because no one helped me with that. Um, all those things. So it's the same practice of, do I have options in this? How can I try to mitigate this this scenario? Or do I sit in it and just do a woe me moment, right? So owning it helps me forgive myself. I did that. Yeah. What did I learn from it? Okay, don't do this next time. Be more discerning in this area. What are the lessons learned here? How can we not do that again? And if we do it again by mistake, how can we lessen it? How can we lessen the pain? You know, and again, forgiving yourself quickly because we're understanding that you're always going to make mistakes and you can't not live a perfect life. You can't live a perfect life. So we have to forgive ourselves no matter how big, no matter how small. Take the win out of it, take the lesson, and move forward. So that is something I've had to really learn throughout my life is this is just something that you got to let go. You can't hold on to it. And again, surrounding yourself around people who love you to tell you it's okay. Because maybe you were in a space where people were extremely critical about everything you did growing up. So therefore, you're now critical on yourself. So the last thing you need is to have people in your life that are going to be critical about the mistakes that you make. You need people to remind you of who you are and how great you are and what's to come. We all need that encouragement. So that's something that I have to add to my life are people who truly love me and are not competitive with me. That is my biggest pet peeve. I'll be honest with you. People who try to compete with me, compete with yourself. Leave me alone. I'm living my life. You know, I don't compete with me. There's enough out here for everybody. There's no need to try to point out my flaws or what you feel I did better or how you can do it better. Do you? If you have constructive feedback, I'm all for that. But you have to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who who are truly giving you constructive criticism and not try to criticize you and try to get you off your target and what you're trying to achieve. And that's where wisdom comes in and discernment comes in. So you got to really make sure that in this life of forgiving yourself, that you really truly put people around you who are going to encourage you and love on you. And lastly, as I close out this podcast, I just want to say, how do you practice this? And it's pretty much what I said before. It's truly creating a lifestyle of discipline and a lifestyle of forgiveness. That is the only way you're really going to be able to operate in this space of life where life events are consistently going to happen. Sometimes you're ready for it, sometimes you're not. But I promise you that if you are a believer in Christ, nothing throws God off guard. My sister-in-law, she always tells me that nothing is a surprise to God. And when you're in alignment and you're doing what you're supposed to do, yes, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. But with that, understand He's always there with you. And you're always going to have options. And you're always going to have a choice to forgive or not to forgive. And you're always going to have the ability to be able to lessen the stress by not focusing on the negative and coming up with solutions. So I just want to say the best way to practice this lifestyle is day by day, moment by moment, forgiving yourself, surrounding yourself with positive people so that they can be able to speak life in yourself sometimes when you can't speak it to your own self. So I hope this helped you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Take care.